My name is Anna. I am a 35-year-old interior designer living in Seattle, Washington. For a long time, I believed I had the kind of life many people dreamed about. Through 10 years of marriage to Ethan, a financial consultant with a polished reputation, I thought our foundation was solid. We met in college, fell into a passionate romance, and married early, eager to build a future side by side. Together, we created a home filled with laughter, shared plans, and countless memories. I told myself we were unshakable. But I was wrong. Behind my back, Ethan had been orchestrating something I would have never imagined. Alongside his family, his controlling mother, Helen, and his two brothers, Ryan and Lucas, he spent 8 months carefully plotting what they chillingly called Operation Divorce Anna. Their goal was merciless: to push me out of my own home, strip me of every shared asset, and humiliate me publicly on the exact day we were supposed to celebrate our 10th wedding anniversary. What they didn't anticipate was that I would uncover their scheme in time. And with only a week to prepare, I turned their perfect plan into their greatest failure. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. The beginning of the storm. It all began a month ago on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was in my home office, sorting through fabric samples and architectural sketches for an upcoming design project. The space smelled faintly of cedar from the desk Ethan had once gifted me, and the late Seattle rain tapped lightly against the windows. I remember feeling calm, focused, almost grateful for the quiet. That peace shattered in an instant. Ethan had left his personal laptop on the desk, something he rarely did. The battery was nearly dead, so I reached for the charger. The screen lit up, and a WhatsApp notification flashed across the corner. My breath caught the moment I read it. Operation Divorce Anna Update. For a second, I thought my eyes had deceived me. My name attached to the word divorce? My pulse quickened, my palms went cold. Curiosity gave way to dread, and dread gave way to a determination I didn't know I possessed. Ethan's iCloud password was no secret to me. I had set up his work emails years ago. My fingers trembled as I logged in, my heart pounding like a drumbeat announcing the end of something I thought was solid. What I found chilled me to the bone. A group chat. For members, Ethan, his mother Helen, and his brothers Ryan and Lucas. My so-called family. They weren't exchanging casual updates. They were strategizing methodically, ruthlessly. Ryan's message was the first dagger. She's too arrogant, always acting like she matters. Lucas followed quickly. I've arranged the movers. They'll clear Anna's things out to a storage unit on Pine while she's away next Wednesday. And then Helen, the woman who smiled at me every Christmas dinner, typed, "My lawyer has finalized the divorce papers. We'll serve her at the anniversary party." Just imagine her face when she realizes. Ethan's reply was worse than all of them combined. A string of laughing emojis, followed by words that will echo in my mind forever. Record it for Instagram. The world deserves to see her fall apart. 10 years with this girl, finally I'll be free. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, the blood roaring in my ears. They had been plotting for months, 8 months to be exact. While I cooked dinner, planned vacations, stayed late to support Ethan's long hours, they were sharpening knives behind my back. And they weren't content with divorce. No, they wanted humiliation. Destruction. I scrolled further, each line cutting deeper than the last. They mocked me for coming from a middle-class family, sneering that I was a gold digger who had married up. The irony stung. I had built my career brick by brick, project by project, never once asking Ethan for financial support. Yet in their eyes, I was still beneath them. Then came the cruelest revelation of all. Ethan had once confessed that he married me because he loved me too much to let me go. That was a lie. In the chat, he admitted the real reason. He thought I was pregnant after a drunken night in college. I had miscarried early, a secret I carried silently for years, never telling him because the pain was too personal. To read that he believed our marriage was a trap, that I had tricked him, was like being cut open with no anesthesia. And still it got worse. Their scheme extended beyond my marriage and my home. They wanted to ruin my professional life too. Helen bragged about pulling strings to spread rumors that I had stolen design concepts from colleagues. If the gossip spread far enough, my reputation in Seattle's design community would collapse. 10 years of building credibility could vanish overnight. I sat frozen, staring at the glowing screen, the rain outside now pounding as if echoing the chaos in my chest. My entire reality shifted in that moment. Every shared smile, every toast at family gatherings, every holiday card, they were masks, carefully worn while the conspiracy grew stronger in the shadows. A mixture of fear and fury coursed through me. Fear because the people closest to me were planning my downfall with surgical precision. Fury because they underestimated me. They saw me as fragile, disposable, a woman too naive to fight back. But I knew one thing as I closed the laptop, my hands steadier than I expected. The storm had begun, and I would not be the one swept away. Counterattack. I am not the sort of person who folds when the room turns cold. Over the past 3 years, I'd felt the distance grow. The clipped silences at family gatherings, the way conversations stalled when I entered, Ethan's sudden defensiveness whenever I mentioned our plans to buy a home. I had tucked those slights into the small, private places of my life, but they left a bruise. That bruise taught me to prepare for the worst. As a designer, relationships are part of my craft. I'd spent years cultivating clients and colleagues across Seattle's design circles. Those connections were now a resource, not simply social capital. Quietly, over the years of late nights and weekend freelance jobs, I built a private savings account, money Ethan never saw. And I had Mia, my oldest friend, who just happened to be a divorce lawyer. She was the single most important piece of armor I had, and I called her within an hour of closing Ethan's laptop. For the next 4 weeks, I wore the mask they expected. I was sweet, even effusive, planning a romantic anniversary dinner, laughing at the right jokes, setting the table with the china Ethan's family admired. If they wanted me to look gullible, fine. Let them. Meanwhile, I moved like a surgeon behind closed doors. I archived every conversation, screenshots, timestamps, saved attachments, methodically and redundantly. I recorded calls when I could, labeled files with dates, and made 3 encrypted backups, one on an external drive hidden in my studio, one in a secure cloud I controlled, and one handed to Mia on a thumb drive she kept in her office. Chain of custody matters in court. She reminded me of that in a voice stripped of sentiment and full of steel. A few discoveries tightened my jaw. The storage unit on Pine they'd booked? It showed up on my credit card history, purchased with my card number used under Ryan's name. I remembered the night I'd helped Ryan pay for those repairs. He'd insisted I save his card on my phone so I could help faster. He'd taken advantage. I called our bank under a pretense, froze the card, and ordered new numbers that only I controlled. Whatever elastic thread they'd used to tie that scheme to me, I cut it. I also learned Helen's lawyer was more acquaintance than counsel, someone she trusted from Bridge Club, not a litigator who knew how to build an airtight case. That was weakness I could exploit. And the moving company had a reputation for sloppy work. A few whispered complaints on neighborhood forums confirmed it. If they tried to perform a quick, sham eviction, paperwork mistakes or witnesses could make the whole thing unravel. I made a note to gather evidence of any improper service from them. Mia and I mapped contingencies. She drafted a preliminary injunction we could file at the first sign of wrongful eviction, an emergency petition to block any transfer of assets, and a template for a cease and desist should they begin to leak lies to my employer. She advised me to gather witnesses, colleagues who could vouch for my portfolio and ethics, clients who could confirm projects and payment histories. Within 2 days, I had calls scheduled. Quiet conversations about reputation, nothing dramatic, just confirmations that people would stand up if necessary. I tightened my digital life. Passwords I had shared were changed, two-factor authentication enabled on everything, and I revoked permissions I'd once given casually. I set up a folder labeled for Mia and dropped in evidence as it accumulated. Every new message, every admission found its way there. I made copies because people underestimate redundancy at their peril. And in the privacy of my studio, I rehearsed my face, the look I would wear at the anniversary party, calm, composed, and utterly unbroken. They wanted spectacle, I would deny them one. They planned to expose me in public, to film my collapse. I planned instead to expose them, their arrogance, their lies, their reliance on shortcuts and nepotism. When I finally slid the last encrypted file into Mia's palm across her office table, I felt less like a woman cornered and more like someone who had refused to be erased. The week ahead would test that resolve. But for the first time since I saw that WhatsApp notification, I felt a steady, precise confidence. I was ready to move before they could. The day of confrontation. The night before the so-called anniversary celebration, I barely slept. Not from fear, but from calculation. Every piece was in place. Every contingency accounted for. The storm they intended for me would crash down on them instead. First, I dealt with the storage unit on Pine. Using the access details I'd uncovered, I called the management office and arranged for all the items they had marked under my name to be transferred to another unit, registered discreetly under a trusted friend. I supervised personally, replacing what they thought was my life's possessions with decoys, an old cracked chair from my studio, faded canvases, and boxes filled with outdated design drafts. Then I secured the unit with a new passcode only I controlled. If Ryan or Lucas showed up, expecting to gloat over my belongings stacked like garbage, they would find nothing but junk. Next, I set my sights on the moving company. Through a client who frequently hired them, I posed as a quality inspector. A few carefully placed questions, laced with subtle warnings about service standards, were enough to rattle their operations manager. Within hours, Ryan's scheduled move was quietly postponed. Without their muscle, his part in the grand plan collapsed before it began. By Saturday morning, my preparations were complete. Ethan, ever the actor, leaned into his performance. He made breakfast, pancakes, strawberries, even coffee in my favorite mug. He reminisced about our wedding day, the vows we made under a canopy of autumn leaves. His voice was soft, almost tender, but I heard only betrayal under each syllable. I smiled at the right moments, murmured agreements, played the role of the oblivious wife. Inside, though, my stomach churned with resolve. He told me we'd stop by Ryan's house first to pick up a surprise gift before heading to dinner. The phrasing was almost insulting. A surprise gift? I already knew exactly what was waiting. Their stage, their trap, their yellow envelope. When we entered Ryan's home, the scene was set exactly as I had imagined. Ethan's entire family was gathered, dressed as if for a celebration, their smiles bright with cruel anticipation. Helen stood front and center, clutching a golden envelope with theatrical precision. Ryan already had his phone angled, thumb hovering over the record button. Lucas lounged in the corner, smirking, a mug of coffee in hand. I paused in the doorway, inhaled slowly, then exhaled. Calm. Controlled. They wanted tears, shock, begging. They would get none of it. Before we begin, I said, my voice steady, carrying across the room, maybe you should all check the storage unit on Pine. The effect was immediate. Ethan's face drained of color. Lucas's mug slipped from his fingers, crashing to the floor, coffee splattering across the rug. Helen's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on the envelope as if it were a lifeline. What do you mean by that? She stammered. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, already unlocked to the chat archive. I know everything, I said simply. Every message, every plan, every insult. I began to read aloud, my tone deliberate, each word slicing through the tension. Ryan's line about me being too arrogant. Lucas boasting about movers clearing my belongings. Helen's smug text about her lawyer preparing the papers. Ethan's laughing emojis, his cruel words about broadcasting my collapse online. The air grew electric, heavy with panic. Ethan lunged forward, his voice breaking into a shout. You invaded my privacy. That's illegal, Anna. You can't just... Illegal? I cut him off, meeting his eyes with an unflinching stare. You mean like fraudulently charging a storage unit to my credit card? Or conspiring to stage a false eviction? Or attempting to destroy my career with fabricated rumors? Helen's composure snapped. You manipulative little witch, she spat, her voice rising. Do you think anyone will believe your lies? You're insane. I scrolled calmly to the next section, holding the phone up for them to see. These aren't my words. These are yours. Every timestamp, every receipt, every file backed up and secured. I have copies stored with my lawyer, and she's ready to act the moment I give the word. Ryan lowered his phone, his face paling. It was just a joke, he muttered weakly. Family banner. You're twisting it. Really? I asked, my eyebrow arching. So your email to the moving company confirming the pickup schedule under my name, that was a joke too? Or Ethan's recorded call with Helen, laughing about how satisfying it would be to watch me break down in public? Do you want me to play it back for everyone here? For a long beat, no one moved. Their plan, so carefully plotted, was unraveling in front of them like cheap fabric. Confidence that had carried them into this room was gone, replaced with fear, rage, and the dawning realization that I was not the victim they had scripted. I looked at Ethan last. His jaw was tight, his eyes wild, searching for a way out. But there was none. You thought I wouldn't fight back, I said quietly. You thought I'd crumble. You thought wrong. The silence that followed was deafening. In that silence, I felt something shift inside me, not just defiance, but freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking to fit their expectations. I was standing, unbroken, in the very place they meant to bury me. And they knew it. Payback. I never wanted revenge for the spectacle of it. My aim was always to dismantle the machinery they'd built to erase me. Once I had their private plans in hand and Mia's steady counsel at my back, the way forward became surgical rather than vindictive, precise, proportional, and undeniable. Over the next week, I pulled threads until the whole fabric of their scheme began to unpick. Ethan was first. He worked at a large financial firm where discretion and productivity were everything. Months earlier, I'd met Claire, one of their board members, while consulting on an office redesign. Claire and I had kept a professional rapport, occasional messages about design choices and her favorite mid-century lamps. But she was not my friend. She was an ally I could call on in a crisis. I sent her a single, carefully organized packet, screenshots showing Ethan using his company laptop for personal planning during work hours, timestamps of searches for divorce lawyers, and calls he'd made from his desk. I included a short, factual note about potential misuse of company resources. No flourish, no accusation, just documentation and a request to forward it to HR if she thought it appropriate. By Monday morning, Ethan's phone lit up with an invitation to a meeting he could not avoid. Call from Human Resources was clinical and immediate, a demand for explanation, an announcement of an internal review. I watched him answer that call in the doorway of our kitchen, his face collapsing as protocol took over. I wanted him to face consequences that matched his choices, professional scrutiny for professional misconduct, so that the humiliation they'd planned for me would mirror an accountability he could not laugh off. Ryan came next. He flattered himself as a deal-maker in real estate, a man whose charm swept clients into contracts and open houses. But charm does not hide everything. A former colleague of his, someone I found through a business contact, had quietly told me about complaints, client lists mishandled, confidential info reused improperly. I fed that lead to the one person who would act, Ryan's employer's compliance officer. I provided call logs and the thread that tied Ryan's use of my card information to the Pine storage unit. That small, private action, someone examining his books, became a probe that turned inward. Within 48 hours, Ryan was suspended pending an internal investigation. His swagger drained away. His texts changed tone from triumphant to pleading. Lucas's bar was different terrain. It was small, locally loved, and dependent on community goodwill. Reputation was currency in that business. Once that currency plummeted, so did clientele. I didn't defame him. I told the truth on platforms where neighbors talked about where to spend their Friday nights. I posted, calmly and plainly, an account of what had happened, how one family had plotted to ruin another's life for spectacle, framed not as a legal brief but as a neighbor's warning. I used hashtags about community standards and service ethics, nothing salacious, but the message spread. Loyal regulars who had always sided with Lucas began to question him. By Tuesday, his bar's reservations dwindled, and within days he was calling to ask me to stop, to take back what I'd written. His apology was wet with fear. Helen required a different touch. She had cultivated influence for years, boasting of contacts and arrangements she claimed still held sway. I looked into the businesses she spoke of and found gaps, missing filings, lapsed reports, a corporate facade without the substance she'd boasted about. I filed an anonymous tip with the state regulator about the missing financial statements and possible violations. The regulator responded with a notice of inquiry. To Helen, who had always traded on the illusion of connection, the notice landed like a cold measurement of reality. Her networks, it turned out, had been propped up by memory and social capital, not ongoing legal compliance. The possibility of fines, public inquiry, and embarrassment forced her to recant the easy contempt she wielded like a weapon. I never wanted to be petty. Each move was less about revenge and more about dismantling a structural advantage. Ethan's corporate shield, Ryan's unvetted charm, Lucas's local goodwill, Helen's supposed influence. Each action was designed to create a consequence proportionate to the harm they intended, an unraveling of the privileges they expected to survive unchecked. By Wednesday, the family's equilibrium had collapsed into chaos. My inbox and phone filled with messages that read like a small, private apocalypse. Ethan begged. He said his mother had pushed him. He said he hadn't meant the cruelty he'd typed in a flash of bravado. He tried to explain away the recordings, the messages, as drunken bravado or sibling banter that had been blown out of proportion. Ryan sent me a message so raw it made me pinch the bridge of my nose. "Please," he wrote, "they will fire me. I have a mortgage. Don't let this be the end." Lucas left a voicemail that dissolved into apologies and threats to change. Helen called once, then again. When I finally picked up, she spoke through teeth, alternating apology and accusation, trying to hold on to dignity as it leaked away. Their bargaining was predictable, human. They had always presumed I would break the way they intended. They had calculated me as a costume they could remove at will. But they had misread one essential fact. The woman they planned to humiliate had refused to be the victim in their story. On Thursday, I sent notices that would change the map of my life as much as theirs. First, a legal notice to Ethan. The house, I declared, was purchased with funds from my private savings. His name was not on the deed. The legal furniture of our marriage, the public documents, did not reflect his claim. It was a quiet, invulnerable truth. I'd never flaunted the account where I had saved for years. Why would I? But those records existed, clean and traceable, and with Mia's filings they became leverage. No dramatics, simply the law's clarity. Around the same time, Ryan's employer's office called him in and served the suspension letter. Lucas received a bank denial for a small loan he'd hoped would buoy the bar. Creditors do not ignore reputational risks. Helen's inquiry opened into a formal audit notice with potential penalties that could not be shrugged off. By Friday, the family was fraying in ways I'd not anticipated emotionally. They came to my doorstep on Sunday, 4 desperate, imperfect people, stripped of the arrogance that had shielded them. Ethan looked small, his bravado gone. He spoke of love and mistakes and how he'd been swept along. Helen's face was a mask I barely recognized. Ryan and Lucas clung to their own versions of remorse. They asked for mercy, for a chance to make amends. I had, by then, a ledger of wrongs and a roster of demands, public apologies, restitution where possible, proof of steps taken to repair the damage to my career and reputation. I could have set conditions that flayed them. I did not. I wanted, with a clarity that surprised me, to restore the balance without turning the world into spectacle. I told them what I required: transparency, apologies that would be shared publicly, and concrete steps to repair the professional harm they intended. I wanted them to face consequences that taught, not simply punished. "You plan to ruin me for sport," I said, my voice steady. "Now you will feel the cost of that choice. Not so I can gloat, but so you cannot pretend ignorance again." They left that afternoon changed, some humbled, some furious, but all of them finally confronted by the very real outcomes of their cruelty. I stood in the doorway after they'd gone and felt a complicated peace. This was not victory in any cartoonish sense, it was recalibration. I had not just defended a home or a name, I had forced a reckoning. And for the first time in a very long time, I could breathe. Ending. Now I live in my own house, peaceful, quiet, and truly mine. I no longer wake up with the weight of someone else's judgment pressing on my shoulders. My work as an interior designer is thriving. Every new client feels like proof that building my own path was worth it. I didn't survive because of luck. I survived because I prepared, because I refused to be broken, and because I learned to stay patient even when the world seemed cruel. Meanwhile, Ethan's family has collapsed under the very schemes they created. Ethan now sleeps in his car behind a convenience store, stripped of the confident facade he once wore. Ryan and Lucas shuffle between temporary rentals, no longer the loud, mocking brothers who once laughed at my expense. Helen, once so proud of her so-called power, has been forced to sell her jewelry to cover her debts. They all text me, pleas, apologies, promises of change. But I never reply. Not out of bitterness, but because silence is the only boundary that protects me now. I spent 3 years enduring their contempt, preparing for this moment. And when it finally came, I did not break. I rose. And in that rise, I learned lessons worth sharing with anyone who has ever been betrayed, overlooked, or underestimated. Lesson 1: patience is power. Revenge is never about striking fast. It's about waiting for the right moment. I endured their whispers, their smirks, their schemes. I stayed still long enough for the truth to reveal itself, and when it did, I was ready. Lesson 2: silence is a weapon. I didn't need to shout, argue, or beg to be seen. The evidence I gathered spoke louder than any outburst could. Sometimes the calmest voice in the room carries the sharpest edge. Lesson 3: independence is freedom. Had I relied only on Ethan's family, I would have been trapped forever. My secret savings, my network of clients, and my own effort became the keys to unlock my escape. Never let someone else's approval define your survival. Lesson 4: boundaries must be unshakable. When they returned with apologies, I could have softened. But forgiveness without accountability only resets the cycle of abuse. Real strength is saying, "You no longer have access to me." Lesson 5: pain can be transformed into strategy. Every insult, every cold shoulder, every dismissive glance, I turned them into fuel. Instead of drowning in self-pity, I built a plan. And that plan became my freedom. Today, Operation Divorce Anna lies in ruins, and I stand as the only victor. Not because I wished for their suffering, but because I finally stopped allowing mine. If my story resonates with you, remember this: strength is not always loud, and justice does not always come in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of a woman choosing herself over everyone who tried to destroy her. If you found meaning in my journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of resilience, strategy, and freedom. Your support keeps these voices alive.